Hello, I hope you're all doing well today. I'm very excited to share this video, and this is the discussion on my C-sharp minor fugue. And I'm doing this video because one of my subscribers specifically asked that they wanted to hear a discussion on this video. And frankly, there's a lot to cover in this fugue. I'm still learning it. I think I have it down about 85, maybe 90% of the way, so bear with me if I hit a few wrong notes. And this fugue has a little bit of an interesting history. It's less than a year old. I wrote it in the spring of this year, in the spring of 2019, and I wrote it at the request of someone who I met online who wanted to give me the challenge of making fugues based on subjects that he had provided. And the original subject here is by Nathan Barker, and he was born, I think, in 1998, and I'll have to double check that. You'll see it on the score that I put up in this video, because I have all of the copyright dedicated to him for coming up with the subject. Anyway, so this is a tricky subject because it begins on the third degree of the scale. We all know in the key of C sharp minor that the scale degrees are certain numbers. So if I were to play a C sharp minor chord that contains the notes of 1, 3, and 5, 3 is E. And most 18th century fugues will begin either on the tonic, which is C sharp, the fifth, G sharp, and they don't really stray from that kind of guidelines. So this fugue is interesting because how do you develop any kind of harmonies around it? And so let's just hear the subject as it is. That's it, and originally it just ended right there on that E. So you have to decide, where do you want to go from there? Where does your subject actually end? And the problem is that it doesn't end on it doesn't even begin to end on a downbeat. It ends on the downbeat of 4, or at least the beginning of 4. So one thing that I do in this fugue is the actual ending of the subject always has different endings. And I think that in terms of being a 3-voice fugue, it's one of my only consistently 3-voice fugal creations. So I'm going to play up to the ending cadence in G sharp minor. So it's fairly straightforward, and as with all of my fugues, well, most of my fugues, the counterpoint relating to the subject is going to be changed. I don't know why it's not consistent. I think it's just a me thing and not a stylistic thing. So after this entrance in G sharp minor, we have a wonderful, somber, almost Bach-like sequence, which leads us back into the key of C sharp minor. So, after the G sharp minor ending, early in the morning. Hear how the subject ends right on beat 2 in the bass. Oops, sorry. So it's simple, but as you can tell from my playing, it's more difficult than it looks. And I guess sometimes that is the case with fugues in general. So there are our 3 statements of the subject before we get to the exposition. And I'm not necessarily that well versed in the anatomy of a fugue, but I remember I was talking last week about the necessary keys that you had to modulate to, and this fugue has a statement in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 statements of the fugue. 2 are in somewhat relative key signatures. So let's take it from the end of the statement in C# minor, and we have this interesting sequence that will get us to the key of E major. So I'm starting at the, this edition doesn't have any measure numbers. Okay, you'll be able to tell where I am. Cadence to E. And again, there is another sequence which has to change just a little bit for the sake of the sequence itself to make sense. So the upper line is as follows. And the reason that it's not, well, the ending third of the sequence isn't as similar as the rest is because we're modulating to F# minor, and that same series of notes wouldn't clash, well, wouldn't fit as well with what's going on in the bass. And what's going on in the bass is a little bit of an interesting movement. At least I think it's interesting. You, as the listener, might not think it's interesting. It might be average. I don't know what I'm saying. When we finally cadence to F# minor, the entrance is in the tenor. keep using that word, I'm sorry. It's a transition. There we go. It's almost as if the middle section of this fugue is the simple recipe of subject, sequence, subject, sequence, subject, sequence. So I'm going to play the ending of we're going to hear it from the E major entrance to the ending of the F sharp minor entrance. That syncopation on the end of beat 4 it's not necessarily unusual, but it certainly adds a hint of, it's an oddity, if you will. It's almost as if we cadenced F sharp minor 3 times. A different sequence, and we're heading to the key of A major, and this was a very difficult sequence for me to write because I could come up with the melody that I wanted in the treble, just like that, we were in A major. And I think that the wonderful thing about the key of C sharp minor is that the dissonances that you have they're not necessarily better. And I'm not saying that dissonance in itself is a bad thing. Dissonance can be a good thing if you know how to use it well. I think dissonance can add flavor to some pieces. Dissonance can add flavor to music, and of course if you overuse dissonance, it runs out. So let me just play this sequence, and you can hear how the falling sevenths, is it a seventh? You can hear how everything adds up, but at the same time doesn't really sound quite right. And so there we are in A major. And with part writing, it's a taboo to have parallel motion. So here we have that E and the B, and then we have an E7 arpeggiation in the treble. But in a way, you can bend that rule of parallel motion because the issue is that they're all descending. It's one thing if you have, say, E, D, G sharp, B, and then you can bring the lower E up to A, and then the D falls down to C, and both the upper voices converge on the same note. But I break that rule, but at the same time, well, it's not a rule. I break that expectation by introducing the subject in the treble in A major, in the soprano in A major, and it's almost like cheating the system, but not cheating the system. So we're in the key of A major, and as always, the counterpoint of the subject changes. And this is one of the rare moments where we drop out from 3 voices to 2 voices. So let me play from the F sharp minor sequence to the entrance, well, to the statement of A major and beyond. Exactly like what I was just talking about a few seconds ago. Even though it's not written in the score, you hear 2 voices converging on that note of A natural. And the sequence that follows, it's again, it's full of dissonance, but it just sounds so, well, good to me, maybe not good to you. And it's a kind of unusual winding sequence. It's non-stop. It's like machinery. And that is one of the things about Baroque music. It's always busy. There's always movement. So let's hear from the end of A major to the final statement in C sharp minor. That's what I was talking about. That distance of the falling sixth against the D natural. Sorry. And it feels like we're in D major for a bit. Right on C sharp minor. But we don't. And this is a mirror. Well, I wouldn't call it a mirror. I would call it a repeat of a harmonic sequence. And by that, I mean beat 2, we're in C sharp minor. Beat 3, F sharp minor. Beat 4, C sharp minor. Beat 1, F sharp minor. And like I talked about last week, the idea of a deceptive cadence, we're in 4. From a harmonic perspective, 1, 4, you could expect a 5, 7, and then 1. But unusually, the last time we hear the subject is, oh no, sorry, it is in the bass. The third subject enters in the bass, and the final time we hear the subject, it also enters in the bass. I don't remember if I did that on purpose. In fact, I don't even remember how long. I think it only took me a couple days to come up with this fugue. Part of it I remember writing at the computer. The other part I actually remember sitting down at a piano at school to write because I wanted to make it playable, and I wanted to have it in my fingers. So, and I don't know why, but the ending measures are some of the most difficult for me. So bear with me as I soldier through them. Let's take it from the A major sequence. Sorry. And that's the end. For the first time, we end on, well, not the first time. Forget everything I said. So the subject enters in the bass, and the tenor around that is simple. Some unusual syncopation going on. So, once again, this is 3 times in the span of 3 measures, well, 2 times in the span of 3 measures that we're hearing that misleading entrance of F sharp minor. It almost sets it up perfectly, despite the cadential point being rather imperfect, even in the final bar alone. Oops. And even with the ending, of course, it was still a question of voice leading, because here you have your C sharp minor chord. Well, your G sharp 7 chord. And so, what do? I mean, ending it on a C sharp major chord would be not too satisfying, but too, I don't know how to describe it, too typical. I mean, it's such a dark fugue, and we've already had entrances in E major and A major, and I tend to like the darker, duller keys like this. C sharp minor is it's a dull, not dull, but it's a shadowy dark key. So why would you not keep it in ending in minor. It just sounds so right. I mean, I think so. And in a lot of cases of Baroque music, some ending cadences are up to the composer. Sorry, by cadences, by what I meant, I didn't mean cadential pointer up to the composers. That's obvious. What the performers. In some editions of Bach's Ultimate Clavier, some of the fugues lack accidentals, and this was because ending a piece in major or minor was sometimes up to the performers themselves. One of the famous examples is the G minor Fantasia for organ, 542. It ends in a full D7, but some performers end it in G minor, but some end it in G major because the fugue has that B flat. Sorry. And that contrast of G major, it brings out the dissonance more, assuming you're in a very reverberant cathedral. But if you, I mean, personally, I prefer it when performers end it in G minor. It just sounds better. But anyway, where was I? I was talking about a major. I was talking about C sharp minor. Sorry, I think I had to restart the audio a couple times there. So I'll probably think of more to unpack while I'm actually playing this fugue. But why these final bars are just so tricky for me, I really don't know. That's probably the only time it's going to be that perfect today when I play the whole fugue. So I guess if there isn't really anything else that I can talk about, then I may as well just play the whole fugue. And as far as tempo goes, a more professional pianist, well, and somebody who's actually spent a year or so learning the piece, would be able to pull it off at a not very fast, but at a moderate tempo. But I think that it's a kind of solemn subject in a way, so it shouldn't be played too fast. It shouldn't be played that fast, I think, because it's just going to make everything else more difficult along the way. And the counterpoint will get a little bit too muddied if you play it incredibly fast. And it might be all right, because in a way fugues can be seen as exercises for the fingers. There are some passages in this piece that it's difficult to coordinate everything. So for ease, but also for musical pleasure alone, you wouldn't take this too fast. But it also doesn't have to be dirge-like slow. I'll try and find a tempo that is at a happy medium. video. I guess that wasn't so bad. Plus, I didn't really think of anything else that I had to talk more about, and frankly, I've probably talked a little bit too long about this fugue, and it's not even really that long of a fugue anyways. What, three pages? Bach wrote longer fugues, but he also wrote shorter fugues with more packed into it. So I guess that does it for this video today. And actually, there's something else that I wanted to talk about. Some people who subscribe to me have wanted me to make tutorial videos. Some have wanted me to discuss my methods, and in particular, I was supposed to talk about my method writing in this fugue, and I think I will. I can elaborate on that. But I am interested in making videos on how to write fugues, but I think part of that is two problems stand in the way of that, mostly because I lack some of the technology to switch between, say, me talking and a notation program, or something like that. I mean, as I've said, I only have an iPhone, iMovie, and an Apple computer. That's it. Well, and a keyboard, and Noteflight online. That's it, though. That's all I have to capture what I'm able to do. So technologically, that's kind of in the way. But the other thing is that I am not a teacher. I'm not even certified to be a teacher, and at the same time, I feel like I might have these good ideas, but I'm not the best at communicating them. And how can you be a good teacher if you can't really communicate? I think that my style is more that of a lecture, which I've certainly done in the past few videos of different pieces that I've talked about. And maybe some people find that helpful, maybe they don't, but maybe instead of say showing a Bach fugue and talking about everything that he does, and there are channels that do that. There are definitely some great resources out there that analyze things like the counterpoint and the harmony and what Bach does with his fugues. I would do that too, but I think that sometimes it's better. Maybe it's not better, but it's different if you have a composer who's studying fugues and writing fugues and sharing them with the internet community. And so and now I'll get to my method of writing. I'll start by saying that writing fugues is no easy thing. It might look easy, but that's because you're seeing the finished product. It's so tricky because the most difficult things for me for fugal writing are definitely the beginning and the end, because you don't know how to start everything and you don't know how to conclude everything, because you feel like that there's more that can be said in terms of what you can do for a fugue. I think that if you're starting off with something as a three-voice fugue, once you've finished the statement in the tonic, the dominant, and the tonic, from there it really is up to your discretion as to what can follow next. Because after you state the subject in the necessary voices, what you can do is very much up to you as the composer. And again, I apologize because I'm not a teacher. I'm really, at best, I'm just an amateur, and I hope that me describing my pieces helps other people understand, maybe not me, but what writing 18th century music can be. And I'm not saying that I'm an expert in it. I'm probably by far one of the least qualified people to be talking about writing in the 18th century style. So, sorry, in terms of the methods of writing something like this, it's really important that you have that you follow the blueprint, really, of fugal writing, which, as we talked about earlier, is just, in something like a three-voice fugue like this, is the exposition. Of course, the exposition refers to the statement of the subject in the necessary voices. So, say you're in a four-voice fugue, you would have one voice would have the subject in the tonic, then dominant, then the subject would appear in the tonic again, and then in a fourth voice finally. There's no necessary direction. If you start in the tenor, you could graduate towards the bass. And then, of course, you'd have to ascend to the soprano, soprano alto. And then finally to the, to the soprano. And then your cadential point would have to be in G sharp minor. There are cases where you can modulate and the end of the exposition can be in the third. So in this case, E major. And Bach does this in the great D minor fugue. The ending of the exposition is an F major. And then we hear the subject. I played that wrong, sorry. It also happens in the great fugue to the Passacaglia and a fugue in C minor. That's a fugue I don't know. I'm not going to continue playing it, but I do know that we modulate to E flat. And so on and so forth. So there are no rules to what the ending of the exposition should be. The middle of the fugue is where most of the action happens. That's where most of the key changes happen. As we saw here, we have E major, we have F sharp minor, and then finally we have A major. So that's the end. That's the ending of the middle. And typically the ending of the fugue is well, of course, the ending of the fugue is the end. Nobody tells you how to end a fugue. And I think last week I talked about Bach's E minor fugue, the wedge fugue for organ, one of my favorite fugues of all time. That fugue is similar to the fugue in C minor, BWV 546. And that, I don't know if the terminology is correct. I think it's what they would call a mirror fugue, because it ends the wedge fugue. For example, we have a clear notion of the ending of the exposition. The ending of the exposition is also the ending of the fugue, but you change the chord quality. Instead of ending in E minor, it ends in E major. And why Bach has this style, I don't know. I have no idea. But because it's a longer fugue, that's the sort of thing that you can do. It almost reminds me of a lot of the arias in his cantatas, because the ending of the, you'd say, exposition of the aria is the beginning of the B section, which reverts back to the A section, and we end on the tonic chord. That's why in a lot of the scores you'll see a fermata over the ending notes. A fermata over the ending notes, yes. Because that symbolizes that, okay, it's the end of the first section, but we have more to go through. But then later on we'll come to a repeat, and then finally end with the end of that first section. And I'm really sorry if I'm rambling. I probably lost track of myself for a bit there. So as far as methods to writing, it would be, it's tricky for me personally to discuss, because I think if I had maybe, say, in-person pupils, I'd be able to interact more. I'd be able to talk more, and I think it would be clearer to have in-person discussions and in-person lectures. But again, I'm not qualified for that sort of thing. And so my hope is that doing videos as simple as these is enough. But I don't know if it will be enough. So to repeat all of that, yes, I would be interested in making teaching videos, but the problem is that it's simply because I don't know how. I think I've gone on quite enough on that subject. So I suppose that's it for this video, really. And again, I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you might want me to do another video. I'll keep making these videos regardless. Who knows? I might even get to every single piece on my concert program. So I guess I'd say in a nutshell that would be this fugue in C# minor. And I don't really know what else to say. I could play it again through, mostly for my own sake, but I wouldn't want to put any of you through that. So I suppose that's it for this week, and I'll have another video uploaded, I'll have this video uploaded as soon as I can. Again, this is Sunday where I'm living, so it might be available Monday, maybe Tuesday. And like I said, I guess that's it for now. And I'll see you next week, and I hope that you all have a good week in the meantime. And most importantly of all, thank you for watching.